that enlistment. Overhead a flapping red, white, and blue, filling the distance. A grand divide between myself and conscientious convictions or belief systems that stop people from killing over religion. I was young, and I was out of options in my mind. It was supposed to be fun, my obligations ill-defined. I'd be the one to take charge with a gun back in my mind. Without college or riches, no dreams are realized. Well, I never have the ladder the Marines to get me the first. Ain't nothing better than dress blues are the ones spitting this verse. To see the world pay into the GI Bill, fat in the purse. My recruiter made it sound simple, a play get well rehearsed. Forever cursed are the ones who get young innocent signatures under the guise of regarding country their honor diminishes. Greed built a standing army when against the founders' wishes. Now free democracy conducts war games and peacekeeping missions. Ironic hypocrisy.
Fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I scored high in my entrance exams on ASVAB and chose the 0341 with guaranteed Hawaii track. Graduated basic, now MOS schools where I'm at. A mortar man with a 35-pound gun on my back. Plus my rifle 8 pounds and 65-pound pack. I'm 18, weigh a $195 and feel jacked. 108 pounds on my back. A boot marine and Cadillacs. A short 20-mile hump. 4 quarts in my flat. After 7 miles, swearing in my right foot crack. I'm an E1. Tell my sergeant I think it's snapped. He's an E5. Shouts profit. Don't feed me crap. You got 2 feet. Compensate and don't fall back. After 4 more miles, my left foot joins in the act. Only 9 more to go. I walked them all, that's a fact. 1 certificate for intestinal fortitude, not having shat. And 3 months healing, lost Hawaii to Guantanamo. Rap.
Sergeant de Victoire, who I met in 6th grade. Dress greens, patent leather, and a high top fade. My mind was made up, I couldn't wait to grow up so I could sign up, man up, and stop the corrupt. A champion for God and country. Just wait till they get a load of me, an unstoppable PFC. Private first class, polished brass. I wanted to kill all the black pajamas that were hiding in the grass. But with no war in sight, my plight to fight never took flight. So I trained during the day and got drunk at night. Set my sights on all types of glory. Fast forward to Afghanistan, totally different story. IEDs, enemies, no front line to see. 80 pounds of gear in the desert, I could hardly breathe. Blood-stained fatigues, very many colleagues sent home to the VA to live with PTSD. Everyday recruiters go to inner cities and ask for
fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
I never let my children volunteer for the military to make the same mistakes as I did these days could be deadly. If they're drafted with Dodging, my go back stay ready. I support Manning and Snowden. You know where this country's heading. Global tyrant, hegemonic, bully police force, demonic practice, virgin sacrifice, bloodlust, oil wars, valuing corporations over people. This is sick worship by objects and pure evil. Material desires get more attention than spiritual. Benefits are based on profits, complaints aren't given view. Arms manufacture, supply both sides of conflicts. Do you have a problem with any of these statements or doubt their truth? I'm a father and a veteran, and I stand for peace. Julian Assange against our commanders-in-chief. But it's hard to be better when daily demands compete. I'm not ignoring the slaughter, I'm just trying to eat like you.
Fallen tears, raindrops from your eyes. Falling rain, let it fall.
Peace and plenty. Peace and plenty. Thank you for joining us this February 17th, 2021. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in to part 2 of our conversation on the movie Judas and the Black Messiah, on Fred Hampton, on the man, the movement, really more so than the man, what he was about, what the man was about, and COINTELPRO. And thank you for joining us. Thank you, co-host, for being in the house. I love y'all. Peace, Natasha. Peace, Mike. What's good with y'all? How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm good. I'm glad to be here. This conversation is like part 2 from last week. So just a brief introduction. Most of you all have been here with us. Yeah, Air Force, 20 years, retired, unpacked a whole bunch of stuff. And so a part of that process has really been around reconciling not just combat stress, but racism, extreme racism, as experienced on active duty. And so when the killing of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor happened this summer, we started this show and really did it in a way to specifically bring light and the intersection of military veterans experience. It's not monolithic. It's no different than what folks are experiencing in the community. So this live has really come, to be a part of that healing, to be in this space and talk week to week, whether we have guests on or whether we are here chopping it up. So I'm looking forward to today's show. Mike?
All right, happy to be here. Hello, everyone. Thanks for being here today. So in my other life, besides being a revolutionary organizer, I'm also a portrait photographer. So I have a lot of equipment. I have all this stuff I've been sitting on that I could have put together and had this fancy webcam set up. So I just did a little experiment and I set it up. So I'm just going, over the top a little bit with it. But man, so much to talk about. I've watched the movie twice. I watched a 2-hour panel discussion by PSL yesterday. I watched all the extras. I've read articles. So I've got a lot of thoughts about the movie. It was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad they made it. But man, it goes super deep, and there's just so much to talk about. I don't know where do you think we should start, Miles?
Should we start with the movie or should we start with current events? We can start with the current events, kind of tie into some of the things in the movie. Some of the, like, there's been a cold storm, a really horrible cold. I don't know about horrible, but depending on your
historic.
Yeah, it's a storm that hit the whole country. Hit the Midwest last week and hit Texas this weekend, right? And knocked out power across Texas because of an old infrastructure, an old grid, and people are without electricity. People are without the basic necessities of life. A lot of homes are electric, and then your plumbing is tied to your electricity. So then you wind up without water. And same way that Katrina knocked out a city, this storm has knocked out a state, and left a state in a lot of people in dire straits. And the country is at fault for that. Clearly, the state, some people would say the state of Texas, the country, the infrastructure is outdated, and the people have not been nurtured and cared for, as Chairman Fred Hampton would say so lovingly. And the people have been left by the wayside, and the country is showing the effects of in-state capitalism, as you would so aptly say, right? As I would say too, like.
Yeah. Well, one of the hardest hit states was Texas. Every major city in Texas is having very serious blackout conditions, millions of people left without power. I know Houston, there's a great PSL article that they released the other day that breaks down what's going on in every city. 1.3 million people in Houston's without power, something like 300,000 in Austin. So these are really serious conditions, and I think it speaks to the fact that in the United States, public utilities are a for-profit enterprise. And that's a problem, because obviously if money is the priority and not the welfare of the people, you're going to run into a lot of problems. It's going to screw people over. So what we need to do is to nationalize power production. Oh, did I freeze with a horrible face?
Even if you didn't freeze with your words.
Oh, okay, all right.
Okay.
I see.
You did freeze with the face.
I
wouldn't
see.
say horrible. Even if Natasha, do you want to chime in? Because I could go on this all day. So even if his camera's going off. A for-profit, even if you didn't nationalize it, people are scared of things being nationalized, right? Big government. Localize it and create power structure, create local power structures that are updated, local power grids that are updated and running on renewable resources of some sort, dependent on the area, what's around them, something that makes sense, something that doesn't hurt the environment, something that makes economic sense. The technology's there, and we know that it's big oil that is standing in the way. So use structures that make sense for the people. Stop hurting the environment. We already know what it's doing to our children. What it's doing to our children's future.
Yeah, it's coming to everywhere. Everywhere in the United States is certain to have similar problems like Texas just had at some point in the next few years.
I want to jump back in real quick and make a disclaimer about a couple of things. Last week I said something. I said I can identify with the this is kind of like an editorial. I didn't tell y'all about this beforehand. I said I identify with the people who stormed the Capitol. And what I mean by that is not that I would do it too. That's not what I mean by that. What I mean by that is after getting out of the military, I felt completely left by the wayside, completely, out in the airs or whatever. And I got into being a Hebrew Israelite at that time. And while being a Hebrew Israelite, I realized the hypocrisy in that. So what I'm saying is that it's easy to fall victim, or it's easy to fall into systems of hate that are, used that are misleading you essentially when you've been traumatized, when you come out of a situation that is really traumatic, you're vulnerable. So that's what I meant by that statement last week. And then secondly, my flag flying this way shows that the country is in distress. And so if you would argue with that, then you need to watch this show. And so the comments are a safe space. You can comment and interact with people in the group. And if you put hate speech in there or anything, you'll be removed. So let's have a good show. Word.
Yeah. We feel that. I think everybody who knows you, Miles, understood what you meant. We all went through that. Anybody who joined the military was exposed to those same crazy right-wing sentiments at some point in their life. Like, we all have weird deviations going on that we're all trying to fix. So, man, let's get into this movie. Right? What do you think, Natasha? Should we talk about the movie?
Yeah, let's go for it. I thought, I agree with you all. I thought that the movie was good. It did a lot of, service to people who didn't really know what the Illinois, or I should say Chicago Black Panther Party was doing. And covering the life of Chairman Fred Hampton in a way that in the way in which he's revered, his legacy is revered here in the city, right? And through the work of his son, Chairman Fred Jr., with the Black Panther Cubs, I think it really told a story about, we talked about the difference between mutual aid and survival support. But to see that there was a need for feeding children. This was before schools were feeding children and providing breakfast. They were raising funds as depicted in the film. And just not just in the film, because I do not want to note before we start that there's someone in the chat who hasn't seen it. So in general, we do not want to have spoilers, but we want to just kind of describe, and this is widely known in history. But just like the Panthers out on the West Coast, you know, out south and in Philly, they really did have a legacy of providing support in the community. That looked like feeding children and for breakfast. That looked like the first sickle cell, dedicated sickle cell treatment in many of these areas, and it may be national. And then also other medical clinics and use. Some of the high schools here in Chicago still, or elementary schools still have those types of clinics. So to kind of know where that derives from, it's a really rich history, which is really American history. And I think it lays down some of the tropes that have been negatively placed on the Black Panthers for so long. So that is what I was really excited about the movie, bringing some of that to light. It's actually driving people to go and do further research. So it's been pretty cool.
I loved how Mike and Natasha, I loved how loving the movie was. The movie was filled with these examples of and I'm not going to give any spoilers, you know, but there are numerous examples. It really showed Chairman Fred as a person, and I like how it humanized it. A lot of times you think movies humanize people to placate the power structure or whatever, and you know, it's as a way of not being political, right? But by humanizing him and giving him this texture, it really brings you closer to the struggle. It really made me feel like thank you for letting me watch it. I need to have a subscription to HBO Max. Full disclosure, you know what I'm saying? Like, because I want to watch it again, and again and again. It was an excellent movie. It was excellent.
Yeah, it was an excellent movie, especially considering the kind of movies that Americans are exposed to.
Mm-hmm.
The movies that we have been exposed to our entire lives. I don't think I've ever seen a movie that ever had an honest representation of socialism or used words like international proletariat revolution, you know, or had any kind of honest depiction. Every single movie I've ever seen, whether it's the Malcolm X movie from the 90s or the movie about Huey Newton that Spike Lee did, they seem to always depict the revolutionary as a failed and flawed character that ends up going crazy, you know. And that's because I think, you know, I've watched a lot of reviews about this movie and I've seen a lot of people talking about it, and I've seen a lot of very serious, harsh critique from the left of it. But I think it's important to keep that into perspective and maybe even keep that conversation in like principled debate between comrades. Because the reality is that the masses, millions of people around the world, are seeing this movie and they're trying to figure out what to think about it. And for all its flaws, I think our role should be to build on what's really important about it. Is Fred Hampton, his politics, his accomplishments, and the community that he participated in and built in Chicago. I think it's important to build on what were his politics, because some of it is left a little bit anomalous or mysterious, I think, in the movie. And Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers were Marxist-Leninists, and they believed in international proletariat revolution. They had a worldview that they called revolutionary intercommunalism, which was defined by Huey Newton in the early 70s. And so I think it's important to think about what they were actually doing when they went and they united with the Young Lords, which were a Puerto Rican street gang. They united with the Young Patriots, which were essentially a white street gang, or a loose confederation of like concerned white citizens. Some of them were revolutionary, some of them were reactionary. But the point is that he brought them together to actually hit the streets and make change and start to unify the masses, the working class. And that's what's really important. That's what we have to take from this movie. All the young people around the world that are in similar conditions, if they're in street gangs, if they're in impoverished conditions, if they're chronically undereducated by the horrific American education system, then like these are the people we need to look to is Fred Hampton. So, and we got to get them together. We got to start building solidarity and start challenging the systems.
It's interesting to hear you say that. I was going to, and just kind of reflecting on that. Earlier when you all were mentioning that many people in the military go through this, experience those extreme, bits of racism. And I think I was just stuck in kind of processing that, because the experience on the other end of that is extremely uncomfortable and violent. And so I guess my real quick question, just a little bit off topic a bit, is where do folks go? So there's a Fred Hampton, there are, many more folks in our communities who are doing that type of work. Like, where do we send people to? Like, what are the resources that we can start referring folks to so that they have political education, understanding relationships of people and how we can live together in harmony, and really start to unpack more than just race, but all of the isms, imperialism, right? Capitalism, socialism. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts on that.
Oh man.
I would say Veterans for Peace is a good umbrella, a good hub for something like that, being a satellite, an organization of satellite, I'm at a loss for words right now, but, chapters, made up of chapters around the country with members interested in all sorts of areas, activism and organizing. So we have members literally we don't even know all the things that our own members are doing and interested in, and their communities are interested in. And organizing and activism, which was highlighted in the movie, is such a different thing. Activists, the article about COINTELPRO, who I forget who was written by, talking about the movement being co-opted, the people being co-opted by Black Lives Matter and by Al Sharpton, and
yeah, you're talking about that article by Kevin Rashid Johnson.
Yes,
yeah,
that was
like
fabulous.
Black liberalism and opportunism.
Yeah, it read a little bit like propaganda, but you need that because it felt good to me. Anyway, I need that. I'll say that as my own opinion. It was a breath of fresh air. I think the people go to places like that. The new Black Panther Party. That was an excellent article. I think we can share that in the resources. We can share the other article which I've got right here that you shared with us, Mike. Is it MrOnline.org? I don't know the
I'm sorry, which article?
The one, Mr. Online. Yeah, the George Jackson article about systemic fascism.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I'm glad you brought up George Jackson, because Natasha brought up, where do we start to develop the correct ideas? How do we build principled debate and discussion among the left, among the anti-war activists and organizers around the world? And I personally think that there is absolutely no better resource than the writings of the Panthers. And specifically, I think the most prolific, the most academic, scientific, credible writer is probably George Jackson, and the book that he wrote called Blood in My Eye. And in Blood in My Eye, George Jackson provides an incredible insight into American history, the history of capitalism, the history of political economy, whether it's through history, whether it's slavery or feudalism or capitalism or the next stage of development, which will hopefully be socialism. And so George Jackson's Blood in My Eye is absolutely quintessential. I've got some of his quotes pulled up here. I think here's a really great one. It says, "Settle your quarrels, come together, understand the reality of our situation. Understand that fascism is already here, that people are already dying who could be saved, that generations more will live poor, butchered half-lives if you fail to act. Do what must be done, discover humanity and your love in revolution." So I think that really speaks to what Fred Hampton was doing when he was uniting the poor and the working class and the people who were purposefully left out of the economy, who were surviving by any means necessary in Chicago, which were essentially the street gangs, or in Marxist vocabulary defined as the lumpen proletariat. So that's it. Go read George Jackson. Every anti-war activist, organizer, no matter what your political spectrum is, read George Jackson. He will break it down, just shatter your worldview. I'm telling you. And he wrote it all from prison. He was a young man. Just like Fred Hampton, he was 21 years old when he was killed. And he was out there really making change, a long-lasting legacy that we should all be so lucky to try to, be half the man he was. So that's how I feel about that.
And he was murdered. He was killed in jail. He was shot by a police officer in jail.
Yeah, George Jackson was. Yeah,
George Jackson was essentially murdered. They claim otherwise, but yeah. Every rapper, every hip hopper should be reading George Jackson as well, and be educating themselves on the history of the Black Panther Party, and Black liberation movement in this country, and the importance of their words and the importance of the vibration that they're putting out into the world. COINTELPRO, if I can go on, I want to hear Natasha, because I know you got to leave us early today, right?
Yes, a lot going on here in my city, just in terms of a lot of work around education. Our schools are pushing to reopen. Talked about this a couple weeks ago, and parents are saying that they desire more. So I'm going to check out a little bit early to get on with some organizing. But one of the things that I thought was really important around, I know we're getting ready to talk about COINTELPRO, Miles, so it's a really great segue. The federal government deemed the Black Panther Party the biggest or most significant threat to America when they were feeding children breakfast, when they were providing medical care in the community to those who did not have it. And so this wasn't, as a result of arming themselves when they were deemed that threat. Like, you know, and that's baffling. So I think one of the things that people, could really do is to dig into what the country deems like a serious threat against the country, and how Black survival and mutual support is deemed dangerous. This in comparison to what we see happening in DC, where there looks like there will a lot of folks will escape accountability for the insurrection we saw on January 6th. And so just to see and to compare, that is just so deep. And I hope that we can continue to have these conversations, even when we're just kind of moving about why we see things and experience things the way we are. Take us off, Miles.
While those Natasha, that's a great point, because while those people who stormed the Capitol and who laid waste to our sacred space, right? Our sacred democratic space, with flags and banners that celebrate police officers and law and the rule of law, used to kill people, used to assault and harm people of the law. So at the same time that those people were already high on, those insurrectionists, those traitorous insurrectionists were high on the FBI's list, they were not treated with nearly the same sort of vigilance or preparation that the Black Lives Matter protests have been. And 50 years ago in 50 years ago in 1969, the Ku Klux Klan and the right-wing extremists were the most dangerous threat to the country at that time. And the FBI spent more time and effort looking at all sorts of groups that were, as you say, feeding the community and offering health care and compassion. And so it shows you that the white supremacy and the hatred of people, indigenous people and people of color, is deep rooted in the systems of law enforcement, of so-called justice, right? The judicial system, for the prison population to look the way it does, with a country that is just 12 to 13% Black, and yet 50%, 50% of the prison population is Black, the highest prison population in the world. That's a clear case of structural racism. Crime is committed across communities the same. Statistically, communities commit crimes at the same rates. So why do the prisons look the way they look? And there are more people, there are more Black men in prison today. We all know now, thanks to I'm so bad with names, the sister, the new Jim Crow, that there's more Black men in prison today than there were at the height of slavery in 1850. So this is a clear case of people needing to be liberated and people being silenced. And how does it play into hip hop? I was going to go into how it plays into hip hop. You have a culture started out of street parties and block parties, DIY, taking power from power lines to run block parties, or having it inside of your communal space, as it was at 15636 Sedgwick Avenue, Kool Herc's residence in the South Bronx, where his sister threw a house party and he DJ'd it. This is 1974, and out of this culture, people of all sorts from the 5 boroughs put together rhymes and beats first, and then rhymes came second. And a culture naturally emerged that was about all things. Gangster lifestyles, parties, culture, Afrocentrism, Black nationalism, awareness, sexuality, everything. And the golden age of hip hop in the late 80s, about 17 years after what people would say was the beginning, was naturally going in a very pro-black, black nationalist direction with the native tongues movement, groups like Tribe Called Quest, De La Soul, Queen Latifah, Public Enemy,
Dead Prez.
Dead Prez. They came a little bit later, but yes, like look up the golden era of hip hop, look up native tongues movement, look up this natural progression, the natural growth of hip hop. These were the big hitters, the heavy hitters. And at the same time on the West Coast, you have the development of NWA and a different vein, a different strain almost, like almost like an indica sativa difference, perhaps. But you have corporate media, corporate mainstream America flooding NWA and the West Coast influence of hip hop and completely divesting from anything native tongues. It became impossible for groups that had hits the year before to get big deals because of NWA. And granted, NWA was powerful, but there was a reason that money was put in there so heavily. And it's the same time that private prisons were developing in our country and the prison population was exploding. The crack epidemic was here. The image of the Black man had been created as a diabolical, dangerous menace to society. It was easy to paint that picture if you had NWA on the forefront. And you know what I'm saying? Like, it was hard to paint that picture if you had Q-Tip and Fife and Busta Rhymes back in those days, on the 4. You couldn't, leaders of the new school, you couldn't really paint the picture that that the Black man was a diabolical danger to society. But it caught on, and once it caught on, you had a self-perpetuating cycle in the inner city of young Black men who, just like they wanted to get into the NBA, wanted to get on the microphone. And to get on the microphone, they were willing to give everything away, all the truth. And so this cycle of down pressing music has just taken over. And today we have hip hop as the #1 selling music in the world. Now imagine if that hip hop that's the #1 selling music in the world had gone in the direction of native tongues and righteous upliftment.
Yeah, hell yeah.
That's what the system is scared of. So
yeah. Well, yeah, I think it's important to take into account that basically all pop music, whether it's rock and roll or hip hop or blues or jazz, and jazz isn't pop, but it's all African music. It was all revolutionary. The very roots of it, the core of it, is African revolutionary music. And so anything that falls essentially to the right of that is like a deviation. But it turns out that almost all the music we hear on the radio, really, are all like weird right-wing deviations of what it's supposed to be. It's funny because, I mentioned Dead Prez. That was always one of my favorite albums. That album, Let's Get Free, was monumental.
Stickman. Yeah.
What?
M1
and Stickman.
Yeah.
Yeah, man. They like, when I was a young man, I loved that album. I knew just about every word. But what's crazy is that I still joined the military. Like, I didn't understand what they were actually saying. And it took me 15 or 20 years going back and look at it. And now that I have an understanding of George Jackson and Huey Newton and Fred Hampton, I go back and I listen to it, and it's a whole new album. There's all kinds of references that I didn't understand before. And it just goes so deep. Just one of my favorite albums. I could go into it, man. You're muted.
I was just saying, Let's Get Free is powerful. That is a powerful, powerful album.
Yeah. And then they had an album called RBG, Revolutionary but Gangster, right? So that's super deep, and it speaks to Huey Newton's revolutionary intercommunalism, which is essentially the combining of the proletariat forces and the lumpen proletariat forces. So they were revolutionary, but also like they were gangster. They came up in America's concentration camps and ghettos. You know, the America had brought its imperial ventures home and built these ghettos in the center of all these major cities that created this lumpen proletariat class on purpose. And they were there to talk about that experience and to create real meaningful movement against American empire. And it's just so powerful. And it's all connected to COINTELPRO. They were talking about COINTELPRO the whole time. They got a song called Police State on Let's Get Free. That was a banger. I think it's the first track on that album. Man, we could have a couple shows about this.
We can. Being a student of hip hop, or I would say, coming up in the 80s and 90s, you really heard storytellers and prophets talk about what you saw around you. Again, born and raised on the south side of Chicago, spent summers in Brooklyn with family members. And so, and just not just those two, not just here and in New York, but, spending time in Philly, going down south and visiting family, right? Like really understanding how music was really telling a story that was real. And so when we talk about like, the systems and structures of white supremacy that, is hell-bent on relegating Black folks to this permanent second-class status, and then dares to over-police the communities that the structural racism is directed to and impacts, and then has the nerve to mass incarcerate and really create the structures for what we see in terms of violence, and then has the nerve to surveil those people constantly 24/7. And so it really is sick when you like start to realize that there is no disconnect, whether you listen to hip hop and understand the lyrics and what's being said across the decades, but to really tie it into what we're talking about now, that the system is not broken. It has sharpened itself over the years, and we look at, and sometimes we can quickly just point our finger to the music as a reflection, but we also have systems that's playing its part and its role too. So this goes deep. I mean, we talked about this the other day for what, like 2 or 3 hours, just offline chopping it up. And so yes, we could probably continue this conversation. I'm glad we're having it. And then I'm going to say peace to y'all. I'll see y'all next week. Have a great show. I'll be tuning in to watch the rest of this later. Peace, Miles. Bye.
No rest for the revolutionary.
Yep.
Good luck with your next event. All right. So here we are cutting it up.
Yep.
We got any good feedback here in the comments? Patrick's talking about Africa Bambaataa.
Right. And we got a Grandmaster Flash I saw up there earlier. That was Patrick as well.
Furious 5. Yeah, man. It's good. So, yeah, with this movie, it's just, it really is kind of a landmark in Hollywood big budget movie making to really honestly depict the revolutionary and his movement. It's going to get a lot of young people talking. People are going to start to try to understand what were his actual politics. And, where do we go from here? What do we do with it?
I wanted to highlight the actors real quick, because Daniel Kaluuya, who played Fred Hampton, and Lakeith Stanfield, who played William O'Neill, were really both excellently cast, and I think that's because Shaka King was the director, but they were excellently cast, and then they really played into they really learned and got into their roles. I've watched a bunch of interviews about their process for it. Lakeith Stanfield said he had to have therapy after the movie was done because of his role as William O'Neill. And for people who don't know, William O'Neill is Judas. William O'Neill is the person who ratted out, he's the Tekashi 6ix9ine of the Black Panther Party. He drew the sketches that got the chairman assassinated. And I saw a documentary with him, and he stood by his role, it seemed, until the end of his life. Because in the documentary, he's talking about the role that the Panthers were playing and how they were misleading the people, and how he seemed to really he self-identified as FBI in the documentary. I'll try to find it during this conversation and throw it into the chat. And then when the documentary was released, he committed suicide that night. So it is so telling that Lakeith Stanfield had to have therapy after playing his role.
Yeah, that's right. Even coming close to that level of psychopathy, it can damage a person. And I think it speaks to what veterans go through. Like we participate in imperial conquest. No matter what you did, if you were in San Diego driving if you were moving pallets around, or if you were on a hospital ship, or if you're a Marine kicking doors down, we all have this similar level of trauma that we all have to deal with. And understanding that you were participating in this fundamentally evil superstructure, and then trying to absolutely change who you are, is a traumatic and brutal process. And all veterans, you have to go through it, or else that psychopathy sticks in your brain and it affects all aspects of your life. There's a reason why the divorce rate in the military is sky high. It's something like 60 or 70% divorce rate among active duty members. It's because they're absolutely deranged by the psychopathy of empire, And so, yeah, in that movie, coming close to an understanding what it means to collaborate with the FBI, which is the FBI and the CIA are essentially the criminal elements of the government. They are the cartels that go out and accomplish domestic and foreign business of the empire by any means necessary. I'm gonna have to restart my thing here.
The article you shared with us from the brother George Jackson, or that quotes him. It's not his article. Is so on point. The different roles that the state plays internationally and domestically. So like domestically with the militarized police, and the propaganda being the freedom of the device, the freedom of access, the ease of access, a state of luxury, enforced by the idea, at least, that your boys are overseas protecting your way of life and fighting for what's right. And what they're actually doing is is oppressing and plundering and moving from state to state to continue the process of exploitation.
Yep.
Can I read this quote? Can I read this quote from George Jackson?
Yes, sir.
Paragraph. Fascism has established itself in a most disguised and efficient manner in this country. It feels so secure that the leaders allow us the luxury of a faint protest. Take protests too far, however, and they will show their other face. Doors will be kicked down in the night, and machine gun fire and buckshot will become the medium of exchange. The establishment does everything in its power to ensure that revolutionary rage is redirected into empty outlets, which provide pressure releases for desires that could become dangerous if allowed to progress. So,
Right.
you know, like, burning down, like having a riot in a city because a cop, because 3 cops shoot through doors and walls and kill a woman in her bed, you know, and then a city erupts into riot, and it starts in protest, and then when the needs aren't met, buildings are burned down, and the people's anger is vented, is what the system wants, because it plays into the narrative. Right? That's the way I read that. And
I
that's
think so. It reminds me of like the beef between Biggie and Tupac.
Mm.
It reminds me of how COINTELPRO, because I'm trying to tie it all together. There's so many different things throughout history and so many different elements. It's all intersectional, and there's a dialectic. There's 2 opposing sides. It's physics. It's how the universe works. There's a black and white. That's right. There's a male and there's a female, and there's an up and a down. So it reminds me of how the COINTELPRO, its project, they definitely participated in, encouraged, and condoned the East Coast, West Coast beef. Like they played into it big time. They loved it because they saw what happened with the Panthers, that when there is self-love in the Black community, when there's solidarity and an understanding of political economy, that's the thing that absolutely threatens the empire more than anything, more than Russia or China or whatever boogeyman the FBI and CIA make up. The thing that really threatens them is the people. And like Fred Hampton said, wherever there's people, there's power. And that's what he did. That's what he saw firsthand.
Solidarity scares the power structure. You're 100% right. And hip hop is the most unifying force in the world. And they're terrified of hip hop. And hip hop police is a real thing. Hip hop police are a real thing. And even the self-hatred within the culture became so it became a self-fulfilling prophecy, you know. That's the wrong term, but it became like the self-perpetuating cycle of people coming in who knew what they were doing was not true, willing to perpetuate the lie to make it there, you know, fake it till you make it. People buying $60 or $200 worth of fake jewelry that looks like 10,000 so they could talk about their drip, and then everybody supporting that. T-Pain talks about that. Everybody supporting that lie. You know, they don't have that. They're not wearing millions of dollars on their body on a regular basis. It's all lies, but it's perpetuated by the industry. And then to be, you know, I got some music for y'all. It's 4:54. I got some music for y'all. I got Happy Rose and What You Need Today. And they're queued up, and we're going to share it. And thank you, Mike. Let me get to this. How do we do this? We share it. Share screen. We love y'all. We thank y'all for being with us today. We thank y'all for tuning in with us. and vibrating with us. And I'm going to try to do this the right way. Application window. Let's see. There we go. And Mike, please stay with me and let me know if I get the sound right. But we thank y'all for being here for this conversation. And these songs, I wanted to say, are really relevant to our conversation today. So Happy Rose is definitely, for lack of a better term, justifiable Black rage, Black anger, justified. And then what you need is the political education. So what you need is 2006, the graduate program, and Happy Rose is 2017 code switching. So let's have a good time with this. Let's see what the music sounds like. Can you hear me, Mike? Word. Cool. Everybody sound good? Looks good? Check it. Yeah. This day is like the last, you know it is gonna be. Humble man, run fast, get punished in front of me. I can't breathe, all choked up, smoking this potently, openly. You choking me, hoping I can't breathe. Eric Garner on the corner, Syrians crossing borders, governors dirty water. This whole system's out of order. Fukushima, no more Hiroshima, no more Nagasaki. I can't take it no more. I need tequila and hot sake. The way these pigs rocky, I luau on these lockhouse, dancing the ashes, aloha to the lustful, throwing wood all up in the Elohim. Pick this up and make it run out your mouth. A race of beings, ancient kings, presently the underclass, naming things, claiming history, board the mothercraft, call the ancestors daily towards a simple life, free of the rat race. Do the math when the path of the righteous won't just lead us astray. May I have the time when corruption's not the way, when it's not Donald Trump that leads the free people, when true freedom means no beings can lead you. I beseech you, the truth of the people won't be silenced. Suppression of these shots fired, suffering the violence from Rikers Island plantation to Pelican Bay. Survivors of these race wars of slavery today. This day could be the last, emancipate away. Humble man, run fast, riding to light the way. We educate, we mobilize, Veterans for Peace. Stand Down Live. Thanks for joining us. Share this on your Capitol buildings. Share this on your city blocks, down in front of City Hall. When you protesting and you're not sure what they protesting for, share this. Make them think. Come on. This is what you need. It's what we all need. In the best interests of my countrymen, I suggest we all take a step out the system. Who makes the wheels turn, us or them? In God we should trust, but we're trusting them. Watching on the news as they play us dumb. Whose information is more fun? I abstain from their propaganda like a nun. In meditation, my time is better invested, like PE and KRS. Fuck what the rest did. Ain't no rest for us ghetto kids. And society is built on the least privileged. And modern day slaves come from all races. So what do I have to say to get your support in the street for economic war? Like Martin Luther King, but we boycott all. Until that day we see the systems fall. Don't try to tell me what you want, and I won't front. I'm always gonna give you what you need, cause there's not one thing in this world that'll stop me. Don't try to tell me what you want but need, and I won't front when it comes to speed. I'm always gonna give you what you need, cause there's not one thing in this world that stops me. Now this might seem like a poison for a cure. How's it gonna turn out? I'm really not sure. But one thing has got to change, and that's the law. How do you import the drugs and call it war? Close off the ports, check the cargo. Or would that go against your inner city embargo? Well, nothing comes out, but the crime goes in, and kids grow up feeling invisibly clothed in the shackles their families chosen, which can best express how our voices were frozen. My toes in, the ocean ain't cold enough, so I'ma freeze the waters and call your bluff. The only thing backing up your dollar is us. We're behind your stocks, your bonds, and your trust. So unless a coup is what you want, I'll offer this advice for your consideration. Don't try to tell me what you want but need, and I won't front when it comes to speed.
I'm always gonna give you what you need, cause there's not one thing in this world that stops love. Don't try to tell me what you want but need. I'm always gonna give you what you need. Don't try to tell me, cause there's not one thing in this world. What the government wants is for me to be quiet. They claim that such words will incite a riot. But the truth is, everyone I speak with is tired of officially elected greedy bastards and liars. Make our taxes higher. Give us national health care. Stop supporting the military. Give it back to welfare. Our education system, priority everywhere. And no more death penalty. The laws ain't fair. These major corporations, they make killing a sport. Then they hire a judge, a lawyer, a court, some lobbyist, a senator without getting caught, and crush the little guy with minimal support. Now that you saw it, don't just get angry or volunteer at your local church biannually. Go home, educate your whole family and spread the word. We need to be free. Don't try to tell me what you want but need. And I won't front when it comes to speed. I'm always gonna give you what you need, cause there's not one thing in this world that stops me. Don't try to tell me what you want but need. I'm always gonna give you. I'm always gonna give you that truth, baby. This is truth, this is love, this is Stand Down Live every single Wednesday. Tune in here, Veterans for Peace, Facebook and YouTube page from 4 p.m. to 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. We are asking for active duty military to stand down, stand in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, with indigenous lives across the world, across the planet. Let's close these bases down. Let's shut down the military-industrial complex. Let's defund the police force. Let's fund healthcare. Let's fund education. All right, let's free our people. Let's liberate our people. Peace, love, and light. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.